Today on the Matt Walsh Show, all of the fear-mongering about Trump being an evil dictator bent on destroying democracy finally led to its desired result on Saturday when Trump came within 1 inch of death. I have a lot to say about the attempted assassination of President Trump, as you can imagine. And what exactly do we know about the would-be assassin? Almost nothing, according to the official narrative. Is it time to take the quote-unquote conspiracy theories seriously? Plus, have Democrats essentially given up hope of winning in 2024 in the wake of the shooting? Should they give up hope? And did DEI play a role in the tragedy on Saturday? We'll talk about all that and more today on The Matt Walsh Show. Does your debt keep you tossing and turning at night? It's like you can't get away from it. The unfortunate reality is that our banking system is designed to trap you in debt. These insanely high-interest credit cards and loans make it nearly impossible to pay off your debt. Thankfully, there's a new way out of debt with Zero Debt USA. You've heard me talk about pivotal debt solutions. Well, now they're known as Zero Debt USA, and they have new aggressive strategies that can end your debt faster and easier than you ever thought possible. Zero Debt USA can cut or even eliminate interest. They will help find programs to write off your balances so you owe less. They can stop those threatening phone calls, and they can do all this without bankruptcy and without a loan. Bottom line, they find every solution possible to end your debt permanently. Before you do anything, contact Zero Debt USA first at zapmydebt.com. Talk to them for free and find out how fast they can help get out of debt. That's zapmydebt.com, zapmydebt.com. 1 inch. That's about the distance between the top of your ear and your brain, and that's how close America came to transforming instantly into a different country. As of today, we're still an inch away from that new reality. What would that new reality be exactly? We don't know. Is it a civil war, all-out chaos, burning cities, and the complete destruction of our political system? Something not as bad? Something even worse? I have no idea. Nobody does. But it's very clear now that we are nowhere near as far removed from anarchy as we previously thought we were. You know, as 21st century Americans, we tend to feel insulated from the kind of carnage and brutality that has shaped the world. The end of history, it's been called. But history has not ended. It marches on and drags us with it. And our sense of security is draped in the thinnest of veils. It only takes one bullet to pierce through it. 2 days ago, that's very nearly what happened. The official narrative is that 2 days ago, in broad daylight, a 20-year-old acting completely on his own, armed with an AR-15, managed to climb onto a rooftop carrying a rifle just 400 feet away from where Donald Trump was speaking at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. This was one of only a handful of rooftops in the area. It was the one that offered easily the best view of the stage where Trump was speaking. The gunman was able to shoot Trump and 3 of his supporters, killing one of them and seriously injuring 2 others before the Secret Service managed to take him out. This is a gunman whose phone is apparently inaccessible to the FBI at this hour, but they're completely sure he acted all by himself. Now, hearing those facts, you might conclude that somehow this 20-year-old had managed to elude detection by Trump's protective detail until he was able to open fire. But that's not true. The Secret Service and local authorities were aware of the gunman long before he climbed on the roof. Quoting from CNN, the shooter was spotted by local law enforcement who thought he might have been acting suspiciously near the event magnetometers on Saturday, according to a senior law enforcement official. They put it out over the radio to keep an eye on him, and that information was passed on to the Secret Service as well. So already we can say definitively that if the Secret Service did their job, that would have been the end of it. Anybody watching this would-be assassin would have immediately noticed when he scaled the building, armed with a rifle, and Trump would have been taken to safety right away. Apparently, though, the police and Secret Service lost track of the assailant. But dozens of bystanders saw what he was doing anyway, and they alerted the police, including a police officer who was right in front of the roof where the shooter was perched. Yet for some inconceivable reason, despite all of these warnings, the 2 counter-sniper teams at the rally, including at least 2 Secret Service snipers that were looking in the direction of this very rooftop, did not take any action. And the police officer in front of the building, who's visible on recordings of the incident, didn't seem to be doing anything either. And this went on for several minutes. Watch.
He was doing the job. I wouldn't even be doing this. I'd be at some beautiful place with a gorgeous ocean. The
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there. See him? He's laying down. You see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
Instead, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a senator.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's
There he
not
is.
easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
On the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof, big guy.
Now, there have been several other presidential assassination attempts in U.S. history. Usually, from the perspective of the bystanders, they come like a thunderbolt out of the clear blue sky, completely unexpected, shocking. This is the first one, to my knowledge, where dozens of people in the crowd saw it coming and spent minutes pointing out the assassin to law enforcement, who proceeded to do absolutely nothing about it. This is the first time that you have a whole crowd of people in the minutes leading up to the assassination attempt pointing to the assassin and saying, essentially, hey, that guy looks an awful lot like an assassin. Yet the authorities didn't radio to pull Trump off the stage. They didn't start shooting at the gunman. They didn't do anything. That makes this easily the single most preventable assassination attempt in the history of this country. The Secret Service, we're led to believe, had less situational awareness than random people at a rally. Now, it defies any benign, rational explanation why so many people in so many places could see this shooter, but the Secret Service didn't get Trump off the stage at any point. They didn't do anything at all. Several people at the rally explained in interviews that none of this made any sense to them from their perspective either. Here's one of those interviews that's been seen many times now, but it's very important. Here it is again.
We noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, and we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof, we can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2 or 3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out. But why is there not Secret Service on all of these roofs here? This is not a big place.
So they can see the guy has a rifle from the ground. They're pointing it out to the police and the Secret Service for several minutes. And again, no one does anything. Nobody gets Trump to safety. And as the guy rightly observed, none of this should be necessary anyway, because they should have already had agents on the roof. This rally was out in farm country in Pennsylvania. There aren't that many rooftops in the vicinity. And of all the rooftops, this is the one that most needed to be secured, but it wasn't. Apparently, there was just one police officer who responded in a meaningful way during this whole process before the shooting started. According to Associated Press, a local police officer heard all these people yelling about someone on the roof. Reportedly, the officer climbed up on the roof, at which point the gunman pointed his rifle at him. The officer dropped back down, retreated, and the gunman quickly began firing at Trump. Now, it's not clear why the officer didn't alert Secret Service or why he didn't engage the shooter immediately, which is what he should have done, or why he wasn't on the rooftop to begin with. Late last night, NBC News reported that, quote, the roof where the suspect was located was a well-known high-priority vulnerability. It was identified just the day before during a security walkthrough. Well, that obviously makes sense. You'd have to be blind to miss the rooftop. I could have brought my 4-year-old daughter to that venue before the event and asked her to point out security vulnerabilities. And after I explained what a security vulnerability is, she would have identified the rooftop as a primary area of concern, which raises an obvious question. Who exactly is responsible for the willful decision to leave that roof unsecured? Why did they make that decision? And also, crucially, why haven't they already been publicly fired? Really, there are only 2 plausible ways to explain how this would-be assassin managed to take a position with a direct sight line to the stage only 150 yards away. It's either the grossest, most extreme kind of incompetence and negligence from the Secret Service that we've ever seen, or they were in on it. I mean, those are our options. There are no other options. The man who was killed, a firefighter named Corey Comparator, would be alive if the Secret Service expended the minimum possible amount of effort to secure this venue. Donald Trump and those two other rally goers would not have been shot. So what that means is that at this point, every conspiracy theory, quote unquote, is on the table and will remain on the table indefinitely, most likely, because we'll never be told the full story about the shooter. What we know is that Trump has two factors working against him. First, the federal government, to include especially the agencies tasked with keeping him safe, hate his guts and want him destroyed. And second, the federal government, to include especially the agencies tasked with keeping him safe, has been hollowed out and rendered totally incompetent by DEI hiring practices. And I'll get into that more in our closing monologue today. But the point is, we simply can't rule out them trying to get him killed again or accidentally allowing someone else to do it. Donald Trump is in grave danger right now, still. And it's clear the Secret Service is not up to the task of protecting him, whether that's because they don't want to or they can't, or some combination of those two. This is a national scandal, obviously. The only thing more third world than imprisoning your political opponents is making them fear for their lives every time they go out in public. And that's where we are. Remember that just a few months ago, several Democrats tried to introduce legislation that would strip Trump of his Secret Service protection entirely. The idea was that as soon as he was sentenced to prison, he'd lose his protection. This was all a big joke on MSNBC, but the intent of it was very clear. They wanted to use lawfare to ultimately cause the death of Donald Trump. In some instances, Democrats came right out and basically said it. Interview with Jen Psaki, Congressman Dan Goldman, who oversees the Secret Service as part of the Homeland Security Committee, announced that Trump needed to be, quote, eliminated. Watch.
It's just unquestionable at this point that man cannot see public office again. He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
So that is a sitting member of Congress, one of the more influential ones with oversight of the Secret Service, saying Trump simply cannot win. He has to be eliminated. And Joe Biden's spokeswoman, Jen Psaki, just sits there and nods. It's psychotic. We often hear a lot about dangerous rhetoric. Most of the time, that term is applied to things that are uncomfortable but true. It's often called dangerous to point out the racial disparities in violent crime statistics, for example. But that can't be dangerous because it's A, true, and it's B, not the sort of thing that once acknowledged will plausibly bring harm to any person or group. But the left's decade-long campaign to label Trump a Hitlerian dictator who wants to destroy democracy is actually dangerous because it's A, not true, and it's B, the sort of thing that, if believed, is all but guaranteed to bring about exactly the result we saw on Saturday. That's the point. It's why they say it. I mean, think of it this way. If Trump really is an evil dictator who wants to destroy America, it would be not only understandable, but in fact, morally righteous to kill him. Which is why it doesn't make any sense for all these leftists to now be expressing grief and claiming that this kind of violence is unacceptable. Really? Wait a minute. I thought you said he's Hitler. How could it be unacceptable to kill Hitler? I've heard people debate whether killing baby Hitler would be okay, but killing adult Hitler? I mean, what's there to think about? From a political perspective, Democrats are then in a real conundrum. And there doesn't appear to be any way out of it for them. I mean, they can't say that Trump deserved to die, but if he didn't deserve to die, then he isn't Hitler incarnate, because Hitler incarnate deserves to die. So what can they do? The only way to continue their Trump narrative is to actively celebrate his attempted assassination. Most of them don't want to do that for obvious political reasons, but that's the problem. If Trump really is an evil supervillain dictator, as they have said countless times, then assassinating him would be morally justified. But they can't justify this, which means they're confessing that everything they've said about him is nonsense. They either have to openly defend his attempted murder or admit they're full of crap. There is no good option. They are screwed. Now, Democrats hope to thread this impossible needle by declaring, as many of them have, from Biden to AOC and many in between, that there is no place for political violence in America. Now, the problem with a statement like that is, first of all, it's rote and cliche. A man just tried to murder a former president and current presidential candidate on live TV. We're talking a historic moment that every American alive today will remember for as long as they live. And in this moment, all you can muster is a hollow slogan, an empty platitude. I mean, that's no surprise. After all, what can you expect from hollow people but hollow slogans? Yet there's another problem, which I hope to explain without being misconstrued. A naive hope, no doubt. The other problem is that the statement, "there is no place for political violence in America," isn't true. It obviously isn't true. Of course there can be a place for political violence in this country or any country. This country was born in political violence. This country wouldn't exist without political violence. We just celebrated political violence on July 4th. Political violence can, in certain circumstances, be morally justified. The political violence that resulted in the formation of this country was morally justified, most of us would agree. The problem with the assassination attempt against Donald Trump is that it was not one of those circumstances. It was not morally justified. Donald Trump is not the wicked, despotic tyrant they claim he is. What makes it wrong to kill Donald Trump is that it's wrong to kill Donald Trump. Not that it's always wrong to kill political leaders all the time in all circumstances throughout all of history. Again, Hitler was a political leader, and most of us would agree that it would have been a great thing for someone to have killed him. Stalin was also a political leader, and most of us would agree that it would have been great if somebody killed him. And maybe someone did, actually. So it's not always wrong to kill political leaders, obviously, but it is certainly wrong to kill this one. And this should be obvious, but it's worth stating because you have to understand the game Democrats are playing. Condemning Trump's assassination attempt by condemning all political violence is a dodge. They don't want to condemn this specific act, so instead they just condemn the whole category. But it makes no sense to condemn the whole category for the reasons I've just explained. Now, after the assassination attempt on Saturday, Joe Biden shuffled out to give his approximation of a response. This is the same Joe Biden who has spent the last several years referring to MAGA Republicans as an existential threat to democracy. It's the same Joe Biden who said that Trump and his supporters will supposedly bring about the end of the rule of law in this country. But on Saturday night, he seemed to not believe any of that. Watch.
But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. Everybody must condemn it. Everybody. I'll keep you informed, and if I'm able to speak to Donald, I'll let you know that as well.
So Biden's assessment is that it's not appropriate to use lethal force to save democracy and prevent Hitler from taking over the United States, apparently. Now, first of all, not appropriate? That's the term I use when lecturing my boys for making fart noises with their armpits at the dinner table. But it's the most Biden could muster under the circumstances because he knows he's trapped. He can admit his rhetoric for the past decade has been a lie, or he can affirm that Donald Trump is Hitler and therefore it's good to kill him. Biden can't do either of those things because he lacks any kind of moral backbone. So we're left with this middling language. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to blow the head off of the leading presidential candidate, Biden mutters. It's rude, you see. It's impolite. It's uncouth. Hey, knock it off, you mischievous assassins. Not cool, folks. Hey, guys, take it easy. Enough with that assassination malarkey, okay? What this means is that Joe Biden continues to be the weakest and most pitiful man ever to occupy the White House. The contrast between Trump raising a defiant fist while streaked in blood and this frail, bumbling, wimpish oaf could not be more striking. Trump will win in a landslide if they don't kill him first. I don't even think they can cheat their way out of it this time. At the moment, it appears Democrats are resigned to that fate. You can expect efforts to replace Joe Biden to completely die down now. Nobody wants to take over this sinking ship. It'd be like answering a help wanted ad on the Titanic 10 minutes after the iceberg. Even Biden's handlers have apparently thrown in the towel, which might be why Biden was allowed to appear in public twice yesterday. In the evening, like 6 hours after his bedtime, he gave this bizarre address from the Oval Office. Watch.
We must never descend into violence. Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. That's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of would-be assassins.
You heard it directly from Joe Biden. We're going to resolve our issues at the battle box. What is a battle box? Is that what Joe Biden calls the board game Battleship? Does he think the presidential election will be decided by a rousing game of Battleship between the two sides? Is that what they've told him now? Who knows? Anything's possible. And this is the choice you have in the next election. A man who could not be thwarted by multiple impeachments, multiple arrests, a criminal conviction, and an assassin's bullet, or a man who is thwarted every day by his own teleprompter and staircase and bicycle and bells. So where do we go from here? There have been many calls for unity in the wake of the shooting. Trump himself has said that he's going to rewrite his convention speech to focus on national unity. That makes a lot of sense as a political strategy. It's certainly the right move in a presidential campaign in response to an event like this. That's the right thing for him to do. But can it actually happen? Can this country be unified now? Is there any chance that we all come together and put our differences aside now that we've come so close to chaos, now that the thin veil was very nearly ripped to shreds? The answer, I'm afraid, is no. That's the conclusion we come to if history is our guide, and it should be, because as I said at the beginning, we are living in history. We are not at the end of it. And history shows us very clearly that when political tensions eventually lead to political assassination attempts, things don't just stop there. The tide doesn't come to a screeching halt. The factions don't pull up short and say, oh, geez, maybe this has gone a little too far, guys. That's not the way this has ever worked. And we are not history's great exceptions. It's high time we admit that to ourselves. What this means is that the forces which, at a minimum, set the stage for this, the forces which have demonized Trump and the movement he stands for, the forces which have tried to destroy him in every possible way, the forces which have actually destroyed many normal Americans far less powerful and prominent than Trump himself, those forces are still at work. They are still scheming. They are still plotting against Trump and against you. We can't unite with them. The only national unity to be had will be had in their defeat. They must be defeated. That is the only way. Trump was right in what he said on stage after the shots rang out, with blood smeared across his face. He didn't shout, unite. He shouted, fight. And that's what we have to do, now more than ever. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Getting life insurance will give you peace of mind knowing that if something were to happen to you, your family could cover their expense while getting back on their feet. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius has licensed award-winning agents and technology that makes it easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find the lowest price. Their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you through the process. Even if you already have a life insurance policy through work, it may not offer you enough protection for your family's needs, and it may not follow you if you leave your job. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies. That means they don't have the incentive to recommend one insurer over the other. Save time and money and provide your family with a financial safety net using Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/Walsh to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com/Walsh. Okay, so what do we know about the shooter? Here's the AP. The 20-year-old man who tried to assassinate former President Donald Trump first came to law enforcement's attention at Saturday's rally when spectators noticed him acting strangely outside the campaign event. We talked about that already in the opening. In the wake of the shooting that killed one spectator, investigators were hunting for any clues about what may have drove Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, to carry out the shocking attack. The FBI said they were investigating it as a potential act of domestic terrorism, but the absence of a clear ideological motive by the man shot dead by the Secret Service led conspiracy theories to flourish. You don't want to have those. Because, there's one thing we know about assassination attempts. It's that there's never any conspiring involved, right? There's never been any conspiracy behind an assassination attempt. It's absurd to even suggest it. It's absurd to even suggest that there might be more people involved in a plot to kill the president or the candidate for president. The FBI said it believes Crooks, who had bomb-making materials in his car, acted alone. Investigators have found no threatening comments on social media accounts or ideological positions that could help explain what led him to target Trump before the Secret Service rushed to present a Republican nominee off the stage. FBI officials said Sunday they were combing Crooks' background and social media activities while working to get access to his phone. The chatting app Discord, a social media platform popular with people playing online games, said Crooks appears to have had an account but used it rarely and not in the last several months. There's no evidence he used his account to promote violence or discuss his political views. Crooks' political leanings were not immediately clear. Records show Crooks was registered as a Republican in Pennsylvania, but federal campaign finance reports also show he gave $15 to a progressive political action committee on January 20th, 2021. Okay. So totally normal stuff here, folks, right? Nothing to be concerned about. You see, this is a 20-year-old lone wolf shooter who accessed a roof carrying a rifle 150 yards from President Trump, undetected by everyone except dozens of audience members who did detect it and pointed it out, but nothing was done to stop him. The lone wolf then climbs up a roof carrying a rifle and sets up his shot slowly in plain view of everybody. He just sets up his shot to try to kill Trump. Nobody stops him. He has no help at all. And then after he's killed, we find out that he apparently has left behind no writings of any kind, no mention of any motive, no manifesto, no social media posts. He's never posted anything on social media ever. He's never said anything on the internet. He's never said anything political ever. One time, apparently, not once. So this is a man who is so politically radical that he would try to kill President Trump, but not politically radical enough to express a political opinion in any public forum ever in his life. Well, you know those 20-year-olds, after all, they don't use social media. Very averse to social media, to saying anything. They're very private. They live very private lives. They don't like to say anything on the internet at all. So, it makes perfect sense. And there's two other factors we have to remember here, that 3 days after the fact, the government's best hackers still have not managed to get access to his phone because it has a password. Did you know that if you put a password on your phone, the FBI won't be able to get into it? So I guess you can use your phone and you can plan all kinds of crimes, and as long as you have a password, it's impenetrable. They can't get into it. They'll just look at your phone and say, oh, he's got a password on it. Never mind, guys. Forget it. Investigation over. And also this guy who tried to kill the Republican nominee. His last and really only political act that he made was to register as a Republican. Right. Oh, and there's one other point too that we should mention, that according to reports, he tried to get on his high school shooting team. It's and he couldn't make it on the team because he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He was I think the word was he was comically bad at shooting. Okay, that's the story so far. And look, it's useless to say, oh, it's still early on. There's so many things we could find out. Really, it's early on. Is this early? Is this really early in the modern age? We're on the third day. It's 2 days ago. We're on the third day. Let's just call it 2 days ago. 2 days ago that this man tried to kill Donald Trump, and we still don't have any social media postings from him at all. I mean, usually, if the person is of a certain political persuasion, when someone commits a heinous crime, we have their social media posts like 5 seconds later. Because it's, generally with most people, especially most 20-year-olds, they've said a lot on the internet and it's all over the place and it's not hard to find. And next thing you know, it's being spread by everybody. So 2 days to at least discover what he said on social media is an eternity. And yet we're told there's nothing. And that's why I'm just going to completely ignore everyone who lectures us to avoid conspiracy theories about this. As I said at the top, all conspiracy theories are on the table. They all are. This could be an inside job. I mean, this could be a patsy recruited by the deep state to take out President Trump. That's a possibility. That is a possibility that we should be talking about, not in like a coy way, but just flat out talking about. That's something we have to consider. That could be what happened. In fact, that explanation at this point best fits the facts at the moment. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's even the most likely possibility. I'm just saying that it's the theory that best predicts all the facts we have at the moment. The fact that his social media was apparently wiped completely clean within minutes or beforehand, for all we know. The fact that he had access to the rooftop to begin with. I mean, everything. So, I mean, that's a real possibility. We should talk about it openly. You can't rule it out. And also keep in mind the timing here. This just so happened to occur at the lowest moment of Biden's campaign. Okay, Biden was at a moment when he's doomed. The worst 2 weeks of Biden's, not just of Biden's campaign, but it's one of the worst 2 weeks of any presidential campaign we've ever seen in our lifetimes. I mean, it was that bad. And at the end of those desperate 2 weeks is when this happens. So again, we have to wonder, was this the break glass in emergency sort of strategy that the powers that be had in their back pockets? And did they finally break the glass? I don't know. I have no idea. But anyone who says that it's absurd to even consider the possibility is either a liar or a moron. Okay? And they, and screw anyone. They can go to hell, honestly. If you're still trying to police these conversations at this point, just shut the hell up. I'm not interested in it. But there are other possibilities. One of them is that this was a lone guy radicalized by all the Trump is Hitler rhetoric and everything played out as it did due to extreme incompetence. And then after the fact, the FBI got in there quickly and wiped everything clean because they know well that the Dems and the media have spent the last 4 years accusing Trump of incitement, and they can't have it come out that they themselves incited this thing. So it's possible that everything was wiped clean after the fact. It's also possible that exactly what we're told is true, that he's a lone wolf, acted completely on his own, for some reason has never said anything political, maybe was never even a political person and just went crazy or something and decided to do this. I mean, we can't rule that out. Another possibility is that this guy is actually a genius who covered his tracks so well the FBI can't uncover them, and who has very well studied and planned and knew the security vulnerabilities ahead of time. Some kind of evil genius. We can't rule that out. We can't rule anything out. We cannot rule anything out. And anyone who tells you, anyone who would survey those 4 or 5 options I've just very briefly outlined, anyone who would survey those options and say, oh no, that one definitely not, no way. Anyone who does that, again, is a bad faith actor or just an absolute moron who should be discarded. Their opinion should be discarded immediately. We need to keep our minds open to any possibility. You just follow, and we're never going to be told anyway. So, in trying to piece it together on our own, we just have to follow the threads as they come up. With no, we're not rooting for any particular conclusion on this. Like whatever the answer is, it's bad, right? There's no good, right? There's no answer to this to this riddle that will make us go, oh well, phew, thank God. No matter what, it's bad. So we'll see. AP, again, has this. A defiant Donald Trump, having just survived an assassination attempt, enters a Republican National Convention, having not yet announced his vice presidential pick, although the latest is that he's going to announce that today. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, he's already announced it. So probably no point in offering a lot of analysis ahead of time about what his vice presidential pick might be, because that's going to be announced today. The only thing I'll say ahead of time is that and hopefully, again, by the time you listen to this, it's a moot point. But the number one thing that matters now for a vice president is that it is Trump's safety, the insurance policy. And so, as many others have pointed out, he needs to pick someone who his enemies would not want as president. He needs to pick someone who his enemies would consider worse than him. And that leaves open someone like Vivek, someone like J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson, even the idea of DeSantis being VP. Now, I never liked that idea up until this moment, only because I think that it'd be a waste of DeSantis's talents to have him as a vice president. But at this point, there's a higher calling here, and we know that Trump's enemies have, in fact, repeatedly said that DeSantis is more dangerous, quote unquote, than Trump is. So I think that should be considered as well. Instead, we'll move on to this. NBC News reports, Democrats fret about the political fallout from the Trump rally shooting. In the hours after a would-be assassin fired a bullet through former President Donald Trump's ear, Panfilo DeCenzo, a 40-year-old Democratic voter from Pittsburgh, drew a simple conclusion about the political effect of the attack. It definitely is good for Trump. DeCenzo reasoned that undecided voters may be more likely to vote for him out of sympathy, and that especially with the upheaval in the Democratic Party, more people, I think, are a little bit confused as to who to vote for. One longtime advisor, Democratic insider, said, "We are so beyond effed." Another one said, "The presidential campaign ended last night. Now it's time to focus on keeping the Senate and trying to pick up the House." Okay, now look, I don't want to lull anybody into complacency. The false sense of security that we discussed, I don't want anyone to fall into that trap. Obviously, you need to still go out and vote. Vote like your life depends on it. Everyone needs to vote. I'm not trying to convince anyone otherwise. I'm not trying to tell you, this thing's wrapped, don't even worry about it. Just kick up your feet and take it easy. But just speaking honestly about the political situation here, this thing is over. Sure, the Democrats will try all their dirty tricks. We know that. But even that probably is not enough. Elections are all about stories. Which candidate has the better story to tell? And Trump's story now is so unbelievably compelling. I mean, so incredible, so iconic, so almost mythic. And Biden's story, by contrast, is so dull and pathetic that you just can't overcome it. As I've said several times now on the show, history is a guide. We are in history, and candidates do not survive all that Trump has survived and then lose. They just don't. And that means, and you can mark my words on this one, the calls to replace Biden will stop now. You're not going to hear it again. You're not going to hear anything more about that. Nobody on the left is going to want to swap Biden out for anybody else, for the simple reason that Trump is going to win anyway. And now the calculation changes. Now Biden actually goes from like their worst candidate, right, to now he's the perfect candidate for the Democrats. He's actually the perfect guy. They are thanking God or whoever they think that they didn't nominate somebody else, right? Because Biden's job is now to lose and absorb all the blame for the loss and then wander off to the nursing home and wither away in obscurity and never be seen again. He's now their classic scapegoat, right? Like that's where the term of scapegoat comes from. It used to be a literal religious sort of a ceremony heavy in symbolism where the sins of the people would be put on a goat as a burden, and the goat would be sent off into the wilderness carrying their guilt with him. And that's Biden's job now, is to be the scapegoat, to lose and disappear. I'll tell you one thing, they definitely aren't going to be floating any names like Michelle Obama out there now. They don't want to sully Michelle's fake astroturfed star power by having her lose decisively to Donald Trump. And they don't want to ruin the careers of any of their up-and-coming stars by, put stars in scare quotes, but by pinning a loss on them. So that's all for Biden now. That's Biden's job. Which is good for him because it's the only thing he can do. The only thing he can do is be a pathetic, whimpering nothing and lose And so now the Democrats are saying to him, like, okay, do what you do best, Biden. And here you go. What's the Democrat plan beyond that? Well, pretty simple. The job now is to fortify their bureaucratic defenses, to make sure the machine is working inside the bureaucracy to undermine and sabotage Trump. Make sure he doesn't do anything over the next 4 years that they cannot immediately reverse on day one of a Democratic presidency in 2028. That's the game. I mean, that's the whole thing right there. Once Trump is president, can he move an agenda forward with all of these forces aligned against him, and can he do that as a president who we know will be gone from presidential politics at the end of 4 years? Can he accomplish anything that will have a lasting impact beyond his time in office? I think he can, but it's going to take a great team, great personnel, and the resolve and determination to push it through at all costs. And also on top of that, the warrant, right? The warrant from the American people. That you can get in there and say, the American people want me to push my agenda through, and you people out there, you people in Washington, you're not going to stop this from happening. And I think he's going to have that too, especially now. So it can happen, but that's going to be the real fight. It's going to be, you know, until they start gearing up for the 2028 campaign, you know, in a few years, couple of years, the fight for at least the first 2 years of Trump's term is going to be a lot of it behind the scenes and all of their machinations to stop him from being effective. All right, we've talked a little bit about the media's reaction to the assassination attempt. It was disgraceful, as you'd expect. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time playing clips and all that. You've probably seen most of them. I did want to play this one clip, though, from MSNBC. Here it is. Watch.
That is the question. And Jen, in fact, we've already seen the finger pointing begin. Some people even blaming President Biden. We heard that very forceful condemnation by President Biden of what happened. As someone who used to work with the president, what are you anticipating in terms of, he's obviously pulled his political ads forward, but as Carol said, the question is, how long does this moment last? And how do you think he sees his role right now?
I mean, I think his role, I'm betting that how he responded was as a human being, which is how we just saw Lindsey Graham at moments during that interview and Senator Sanders and Senator Coons respond. That's how everybody should be responding. For anyone out there who has a platform, who thinks the moment right now is to be political and attack the other party, you are feeding into the danger. You are making it more likely there's retaliation. I'm incredibly scared. I'm scared for journalists. I'm scared for people who have public platforms of all parties, and that's how people should feel. So for President Biden, I mean, Senator Coons mentioned he was in church. He's somebody who's very prayerful. He is somebody who attends church. I think he probably is relying on that. And in this moment, I think his instinct would be not to be political. And you just take it day by day. That's where he would be. I mean, he has a huge interview tomorrow. And the moment there is not to talk about the political path forward. It is to be a healer and to lower the rhetoric and the tenor in the conversation in the country.
It's just fascinating. Every conversation is going to be different, including that interview.
I'm incredibly scared. That's how people should feel. Really, people should feel incredibly scared? I mean, when is fear, incredible fear, ever the advisable and desirable response to anything? And why is she scared for journalists? All right, so Donald Trump is an inch away from death, and her first thought is, I hope they don't, what about me? Think about me, think about the journalists. Of course, it's not a surprise. She cannot see anything except through the lens of her own victimhood. Journalists cannot see anything except through the lens of their own victimhood. And you have to understand, for the media, and they've had to try to control themselves, and they've done as good a job of that as we could possibly expect them to do. So they've had to try to control themselves and bottle up, to whatever degree possible, their contempt for Trump just in the last couple of days. And that won't last long. That'll last a few more days at most. But thinking about where that contempt comes from, And a lot of it is political, ideological, obviously. We know all that. But the other thing that I think probably isn't discussed enough is that journalists are also very jealous. They're envious of Trump. And I don't want to get into too much psychoanalysis of these people, but I think it's a not insignificant part of the story here. It's one of the explanations for why they are so hostile to Trump. Again, apart from ideology, that all that, of course, there's that. But there have been Republican presidents before, obviously. There are many other conservatives out there. Many other political figures and other figures who are more conservative than Trump. And the media hates all of them too and pulls a lot of the same tricks, but not to the same degree. I'm not saying anything we don't already know. They hate Trump with a special intensity. And I think that this is part of the reason why, that they are envious of him. Because Trump's a star, and Trump pretty much always has been. And that's what all these people in the corporate media want to be. Like, none of them want to be journalists. These are not serious people who want to engage in the serious act of journalism. That's not why they're there. They're there because they want to be on TV and they want to be stars. And, really they'd prefer to be, Hollywood stars or whatever, but they had to settle for this. And that's what they want to be. And so they see Trump and they see his celebrity and it's what they want to have. And I think now, after that moment on Saturday, even though they're containing it for now a little bit, as much as they can, their envy and therefore resentment of him is like boiling, right? We're talking, it's like a volcanic explosion or on the precipice, like the lava is about to come spewing out of the volcano, just from this envy they're bottling up because of that moment that Trump had. It's a real moment. It's not a movie. Smeared in blood, standing up on stage, fist in the air, chanting fight, it's just a heroic, iconic moment that will live forever in American history. And all these journalists, they fashion themselves heroes and icons, and they tell themselves that story over and over again. And, Hollywood makes movies where journalists are the heroes, and we get this constantly. But it's only ever in the movies. None of these people have ever had a moment like that, and never will. But that's the moment they want. And I think they really hate him for that. And of course, we also hear, don't politicize. She says, let's not engage in politics. And we're hearing that a lot too, right? There's two things that we're hearing quite a bit. And one is there's no place for political violence. We've already dealt with that. And the other one related is let's not engage in politics. Let's not politicize this event. Well, the only reason they're saying that, of course, is that the politics of this situation are bad for them. It's the reason they don't want to politicize it. But unfortunately for them, there is no way to depoliticize a political assassination attempt. This is the most radical political act anyone can engage in. And there's no way to talk about it apart from that. It is a political act. It just is. And so the idea that we should talk about it apart from politics or not bring politics into it, how can you not bring... You have a guy who tried to kill a presidential candidate. There's no way to, let's not bring politics into this. It's not possible to not bring politics. Politics are inextricably wrapped up in this story, no matter what we do. So when they say don't bring politics into it, what they mean rather is, it's not like, well, they want you to refrain from doing something. They want you to refrain from adding something into this that doesn't belong. Instead, they want to sanitize this. They want to take an element that is a part of this story, which is the politics of it, and they want to extract that. They want to take that out. And we're already seeing that with how they're treating the shooter and would-be assassin. That we're supposed to believe that this was a totally non-political person, which doesn't exist in the world. right? Nobody is totally non-political. And if ever anyone could qualify as non-political, it's definitely not going to be a presidential assassin or attempted assassin. So, but that's what they're going to try to do. And I also, you know, I want to be careful about predicting the future, but if I were to offer any theory about what might come next, I think they're going to try to ride this horse for a while if they can. That it's non-political. This guy, who knows? You know, he just he was having a bad day. Who knows? He didn't like Trump because maybe he didn't like him for some non-political. Maybe he really hated the show The Apprentice. You know, maybe there's a non-political reason for shooting Trump. So they'll try to go with that. It's not going to work. What I would expect their next move, and we're already seeing a little bit of this happen, is going to be to say that, okay, well, he was politically motivated, but he was actually a radical right-winger who hated Trump for not being right-wing enough. And if I had to predict what their next narrative pivot is going to be, I would bet it'll be something like that. And it will all be nonsense, and we can't believe or trust any of it, of course. Are you still struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns? The IRS is escalating collections by adding 20,000 new agents and sending millions of demand letters. Handling this alone can be a huge mistake and cost you thousands of dollars. In these challenging times, your best offense is with Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience, the experts at Tax Network USA have saved clients millions of back taxes. Regardless of the size of your tax issue, their expertise is your advantage. The Tax Network USA offers 3 key services: protection, compliance, and settlement. Upon signing up, Tax Network USA will immediately contact the IRS to secure a protection order, ensuring that aggressive collection activities such as garnishments, levies, or property seizures are halted. If you haven't filed in a while, if you need amended returns or are missing records, Tax Network USA's expert tax preparers will update all of your filings to eliminate the risk of IRS enforcement. Then they'll create a settlement strategy to reduce or eliminate your tax debt. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and now that tax season is over, collection season has begun. Tax Network USA can help, even with state tax issues. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-245-6000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. That's 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. The attempted assassination of President Donald Trump is a new low, but are we really surprised? This is where hysterical rhetoric and unhinged hatred inevitably leads. The pattern is clear. They're not just coming for our ideas anymore, they're coming for us. At the Daily Wire, we've been exposing the left insanity for many years. While the mainstream media trips over itself to spin this story, we keep hammering away at the truth they want to bury. The stakes have never been higher. The left is unraveling, and they're getting desperate. That's why our work matters now more than ever. If you're sick of the lies and ready to fight back, go to dailywire.com/subscribe and become a member today. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. It's still not entirely clear how a would-be assassin managed to take a position only 400 feet away from Donald Trump, a distance so close that skilled snipers would consider it essentially point-blank range. There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we will likely never know. But we do know that Trump had, at best, in the most optimistic terms, an extremely inept, clumsy, and amateurish security detail. When you watch the footage, you are first shocked just by witnessing an attempted assassination, and then shocked by how ridiculous the security team looks. And this absurdity is due, not entirely, but in very large part, to the fact that the 6'3" Donald Trump was protected by more than one tiny, and from the look and sound of it, rather scared and overwhelmed woman. Watch again the video of the moment it all happened and the several moments after. Listen to the voices of the Secret Service agents on stage. And listen for one voice in particular. Listen.
And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
What are we doing? What are we doing? Where are we going? Shouts a female voice. Now, I'm no security consultant myself, but I do have my own small security detail that accompanies me to many of my public events. It's a much smaller team, as you can imagine, and with much more limited resources, but I do know that the first thing they do before we arrive at a venue is establish the evacuation plan in case any proverbial crap hits the proverbial fan. They won't need to shout, "What are we doing?" to each other if that scenario arises, because they already know what they're doing. In the case of the Secret Service, I would think that they would have even more detailed plans, and yet this female agent was totally clueless when the time came. And that's just the audio. The visuals are even worse. Consider now the iconic photo of Trump pumping his fist defiantly in the air, and right after the shooting, notice the female agent in front of him bent over, exposing his chest and head. Now, she does stand upright after the picture is taken, to be fair, but Trump's head and chest are still exposed because she is significantly shorter than him. And that photo is not nearly as damning as this one, where we see a different female agent crouched behind Trump and the other agents. She seems to me to appear to be shielding herself with their bodies rather than the other way around. And a few moments later, we see that same female agent, along with two others, looking, it would seem, panicked as they stand around Trump's vehicle and then wander away from his vehicle, leaving it exposed before coming back to it. Watch. Notice, as I'm sure you did, the agent struggling to holster her gun, giving up, and then trying again. It is a comedy of errors, only the comedy is not very funny given the circumstances. Now, you might say that it's unfair to pin the security failures on the women. After all, the failures here go all the way to the top. I mean, they go far beyond the agents on the ground that day. Well, unfortunately, the person at the top of the Secret Service is also a woman. Kim Cheadle was appointed Secret Service Director by Joe Biden in 2022. Immediately upon being appointed, she did what liberal women in charge of any agency, organization, or company always do: prioritize DEI above all else. The Daily Signal reports, quote, Cheadle has been a forceful advocate of diversity in the Secret Service and the security industry. She spoke about this in a 2022 interview with the website Women in Security while she was still working at PepsiCo. Quote, that achievement in a male-dominated industry was not lost on me, Cheadle said in the interview. I kept a photo on my desk of the first 5 women sworn into the service, and I used that to remind me that these women created opportunities for me, and I can help others grow and lead as well. In a CBS interview in 2023, Cheadle addressed some of the issues in the Secret Service and said that a major priority would be diversity efforts. CBS noted that Cheadle was committed to having the Secret Service be 30% women by 2030. Here's the CBS report just mentioned.
To expand hiring, they're aiming to have 30% women recruits by 2030, and even allowed YouTube influencer Michelle Carre to train with agents.
But I'm very conscious, as I sit in this chair now, of making sure that we need to attract diverse candidates and ensure that we are developing and giving opportunities to everybody in our workforce, and particularly women.
That workforce will be pivotal for the 2024 campaign season, which for the first time includes a former president who already has lifetime protection. Agents were there when Donald Trump was arraigned in New York.
We were able to work out the details ahead of time of how that particular day was going to go, but we will always ensure the safety of all of our protectees that we have.
The service has a zero-fail mission, a mission officers are training to uphold, pretending this field is the most famous address in America.
Well, it's truly shocking, isn't it? The director of the Secret Service was focused on using social media influencers to attract more female applicants, and somehow that strategy did not result in a more skilled and competent workforce at the agency. What a twist. Who could have seen that coming? I mean, besides everybody with a functioning brain. Now, from my vantage point, it could not be more clear that DEI policies and the forced inclusion of women probably played at least a role in this tragedy. DEI almost got a presidential candidate killed we can now say with some confidence. But does that mean that no woman should ever be allowed to serve in the Secret Service? Well, yes, it does. A serious country would not hire women to protect its presidents, for all of the reasons exhibited in painful detail on Saturday. For one thing, even if they do their jobs perfectly, they still lack the physical strength and stature to provide cover for a larger than average man or even a smaller than average man. Look at the woman standing in front of Trump. Does anyone really think that the best person for that job, the best, most qualified human to be standing there in that position, in that situation, on that day, is a woman 2 heads shorter than the man she's protecting? Would any serious person deny that it would have been much better to have a larger and stronger man there? No, not any serious person. This is why there should be no women in the Secret Service at all. This is supposed to be an elite security unit. And there is just no way that a woman, any woman anywhere, could be more objectively suited for the job than all the men you'd have to pass over to select her. And that's why, just like in the military, the police, fire department, etc., the physical fitness standards for women in the Secret Service are lower than they are for men. Okay, which means the people making the decision to recruit women into these roles know that women are less qualified, which is why they lower the standards in order to recruit them. But I think this is the easy and, among sane people anyway, uncontroversial part of this conversation. Women are smaller and weaker than men. They just are. A man like Trump should not be protected by women smaller and weaker than he is. And that's reason enough to exclude women from the agency. But it's not the only reason. There's also the fact that women are not psychologically and emotionally equipped to deal with these kinds of high-stress situations. And notice I say these kinds of high-stress situations. There are other kinds of high-stress situations that women are built to endure. Pregnancy and childbirth, for instance, are high-stress situations. And so the point is not that women are across the board incompetent and helpless. I mean, some women are, just like some men are, but that's not the point. The point is that this kind of situation, this kind of situation, a sudden emergency, life or death, physical peril, chaos, screaming, this kind of situation is one where men are much, much more likely to respond in a cool, calm, unemotional, and level-headed way. Men and women are different. We have different bodies and different minds. A man's mind and body are made a certain way and specially equipped for moments like this. Now, feminists will deny that, of course, but every single one of them, if they're married, which is a big if, will be waking their husbands up to go downstairs and investigate a loud noise in the middle of the night, okay? There's not a woman alive on this planet who would not immediately lose any and all respect for her husband if he woke her up to go check on the noise. Okay, if her husband's shaking her awake in the middle of the night, honey, can you go check it? I'm scared. There's a loud noise downstairs. Can you go check it? I don't care how much of a feminist you are. Your husband does that to you, and you'll never look at him the same again. And that's because every woman, when push comes to shove, absolutely recognizes that men are the ones who are supposed to deal with the scary, violent things. That's why they should be the Secret Service agents and the cops and the combat troops. Men are also generally more, and again, generally, men are generally more decisive than women. They make decisions quicker, more confidently. You can hear that in the footage. It's a woman screaming to the men, asking what they're supposed to do. So even in the Secret Service, the women turn to the men to make decisions. This, again, is a dynamic that all married couples have observed, and not only in high-stress situations. You know, even if the decision is something with relatively low stakes, but not no stakes, like something like, where are we going for dinner tonight? Generally, the wife will expect the husband to take the lead. We all know as men that if you say to your wife, well, where do you want to go tonight? You'll be here until breakfast, and then the decision will not matter anymore. So we've all noticed these dynamics. We've lived them. We just have. And yet so many of us have been engaged in a giant game of make-believe, pretending that we don't notice the things that we know we do notice, and we know everyone else knows that we notice them. Now, does that mean that men will always answer the call and answer it well? No. I mean, there were a lot of men that that we can assume screwed up on Saturday. Think about the cops in Uvalde, who also proved this point. But the answer is to find better men, not to give up and resort to putting women in these roles. And that is why the women in the Secret Service, and after this weekend's performance, the Secret Service in general, are all today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Today on The Ben Shapiro Show, President Trump calls for unity after a would-be assassin nearly kills him. President Biden calls to cool down the political rhetoric. And Judge Eileen Cannon kills the Trump classified documents prosecution. That's today on The Ben Shapiro Show. Give it a listen.